Welcome to Good Goodbyes, the funeral facts podcast. We are really glad you found us. In this podcast, me, Simon, a funeral director,
And me, Tina, I'm an independent celebrant.
are going to discuss all things funeral in an informal space to demystify what happens when we say goodbye.
Based on your questions and queries, Si and myself are two industry professionals that are going to chat through the hows, whats and wherefores. We actively work in the funeral industry in Devon in the UK. So, we hope you enjoy the episode ahead. Welcome to Good Goodbyes. Hello, welcome to Good Goodbyes. This is Tina, and this week I am joined by Charles Russell, who in a moment I will get to introduce himself. But what I know about Charles is he will not tell you that he is an award-winning funeral celebrant, and he won this award last year. So it's a pleasure to work with Charles from time to time. He is in my area. Charles, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi Tina, how are you?
I'm really well, actually. It's a
Good.
bit of sunshine in my window, and that's always a lovely feeling, isn't it?
Yes, well, I have liquid sunshine here, so it's, as most have been having.
Some form of sunshine. We're recording this, listeners, in the end of February, so it's no wonder it's been a bit rainy today. So, Charles, I asked you to come and join me to talk about a couple of things. One is a book that you've written, which I'm sure we'll get to, but the other is how children can be involved in funerals and celebrations of life. And I know that you have a lot of experience in this area. So
Yeah.
there will be people listening and they potentially be thinking, well, that can't be right, involving children. What's your wisdom on that?
I think if we go back generations, children were hidden from funerals and shut away and don't need to know about this and sent off to be with a neighbour for a day while parents went to the funeral and then came back and life just carried on. And I think that's maybe why nowadays we have this stigma of a funeral and people are frightened, they don't know what to expect because we haven't been used to it through our lives. But I think if we're introduced to it at an early age, then we have an understanding of it as we are introduced to other things in life from an early age, whether it be hobbies, whether it be schooling, whatever we do, it becomes the norm. Now, I'm not saying funerals should become the norm, but I think that when a funeral's needed and it happens in a family, that it's a family occasion and it's a family event. And it's
And it's
honesty.
interesting how young a child can be to really understand this concept of,
Yes.
of being alive and then no longer being alive. You know, I certainly remember my daughter burying the hamster, you know, at quite a young age and really understanding the fact that it was no longer here and she wanted to say goodbye to it. And we had a lollipop stick cross and all
Yes.
of, you know, a proper, we stood by the little hole and she put him in and, you know, she wanted to say some words. Thanks for being a good hamster hobnob. And we had it all going on. So I think, you know, families, we even nowadays, I do hear them say, oh no, that I always ask, will there be children there? And often they'll say, oh no, no, no.
No.
And I'll ask how old they are, and I'll say they're very welcome to be there. And if you want to talk about special ways they can be involved, I'm very happy to do that with you. But it often is still the response, actually.
I think, and obviously there can be children involved at different levels because it could be grandma, it could be an aunt or an uncle, it could be a cousin, a niece, and it could be a parent, which sadly we see. And for a little tops, of 6, 7, 8, 9, even 12, 13, it's hard. It's hard when we're an adult, but I think with a child, and that's what they're going to remember.
Yeah. And a
And I
sibling,
think
of course,
children,
as well. Yeah.
yeah, and I think nowadays children are far more, a lot of them express their feelings more than maybe we were allowed to when we were younger.
It maybe
Children
was a
were
bit more seen and not heard when we were young.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I personally, and families do ask our advice, and I was only asked yesterday by a family about a grandchild attending. I would always say yes, and I think that's my feelings. Doesn't mean then maybe right in other people's eyes, but certainly from my perspective, and protecting going forward, You know, I talk to adults now who are organising funerals for their parents, and they'll say, "This is the first time I've ever
Mm,
had to deal with or be involved with a funeral." You know, and that's not saying children should be preparing funerals,
no.
but if they're involved, then they may, oh yes, I remember when Granny went, I was asked to light a candle or write a letter to put on top of the coffin
Yeah.
or cut a piece of ribbon. Just something that is about them and getting involved with that service.
Yeah. And I thought it might be quite nice for our listeners to hear some of the options that they might have, because, like
Yes.
you, I'm really encouraging about young people being involved in funerals. They've often had a relationship with a person, so they will experience a loss as well in a different way. Yes, of course,
Yes.
but they will.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I've certainly, I mean, last year there was a young lady, and I think she was about 11, but she
Mhm.
stood up and she read something out, and she was adamant about the way she wanted to do it and where she wanted to be standing, and all of
Wonderful.
that. So not
And
all
I
young
think
people
some
are like that, of
no,
course, everyone's
and
different, but
I think sometimes, Tina, the fear of the adult, you know, because as you well know, it's hard for an adult to get up and stand to speak at a funeral. So straight away they put their fear sometimes into that child and think, well, no, they can't do it because they themselves can't do it. And that's fine. It's okay not to be able to do it because it's a difficult and nobody knows how we're going to feel until we're at that moment.
mm,
And I think sometimes they put their own fear in the way of maybe what the child or the younger person feels.
yeah, I think you're right about that. It's such an important thing you've said. And I also think sometimes the fear of other people getting upset is what stops people from doing things, including the fear of seeing a child getting upset.
Yeah. Because
But
how, as
if
an
there's
adult, are you meant to support that child? We don't all know.
exactly, and we all try and protect each other, and we all do this thing in life where we don't want each other to get upset. But the one place everyone can legitimately be upset is
Yes,
at a funeral or at a
absolutely.
celebration of life.
Yes,
So what sort of
absolutely.
things can we give a bit more information
Yes,
about?
I mean, so certainly. So, I mean, I think allowing children to participate in a funeral is, you know, is nice as well as just being there. And it can be symbolic of the fact that they might have drawn a picture for
Mm,
Nanny, Granny, you know, maybe that's something they used to enjoy doing together. Maybe think of things that the child enjoyed doing with the person who's passed away. You know, whether it's making a cake, you know, let's put a fairy cake on the top of the coffin.
mm,
Let's put a picture on top of the coffin. And then obviously then with the pictures, there's the option, obviously, then does the picture then go with Granny? So it goes with her, or is it going
mm.
to be kept back? You know, so there's lots of different options there with that. Maybe saying a few words. You know, maybe they want to write a poem, or I encourage younger people to do like an acrostic poem. So we have grandma going down the page, and G stands for great, you
Mm,
know, R stands for really, really kind, you
mm,
know. So we have this acrostic poem. And
mm,
then going forward with the child, they could then make, I suggested to a family a few weeks ago that we had Nan, very small, but obviously short letters. But we did Nan, and then I suggested, well, why don't you then go to a shop and buy some like Scrabble letters and stick the NAN on a piece of paper, write it nicely and frame it and have it on the
mm,
wall at home. You know, so we've then got that, and let's have a flower out of the flowers and let's press it.
mm.
You know, so then you've got the option
Yeah,
to keep that, and that becomes a really treasured thing then.
it does. There's some lovely things in what you said. I mean, I've seen a drawing done that was then put on the order of service, on the back of the
Yeah.
order of service. My
Hmm.
me and my nana it was, and it was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
stick drawing. It was a sweet
Yeah.
little child's stick drawing of me and nana. And I love the bits about making and doing, because I think it's really
Yes.
great for kids to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And
Then
they,
we have the lighting a candle. You know,
yeah.
lighting a candle can be done if the service venue allows that.
Mm.
It's not quite the same as clicking on a battery one. It
No, I've
doesn't seem
done
to
a
have the
couple out.
same effect.
No, I've done a couple outside, because in the area you and I work in, there's
Yes,
one crematorium that is less encouraging about
yes,
lighting a candle inside. And so we've
yes,
done a couple of lightings outside.
Yes, yes,
afterwards.
yes.
And that's a
And I
possibility.
think other things as well, Tina, I think more so depending on maybe the relationship with the child and the deceased, is that sometimes when the coffin comes in, it may have a teddy on it,
Mm,
maybe a bee or a rabbit or a teddy bear. And then at the end of the service, that teddy bear then gets taken off and given to that child.
mm,
And it might be the fact that that might be a parent they've lost
mm,
or a grandparent that's been very close. It might not necessarily work with all relationships. But I think that when it's a very poignant moment, I think that's almost then a gift from
mm,
Daddy to
mm,
little Charlie or Tommy or whoever,
mm,
just to say, here you are, this is
mm,
off Dad.
mm. That's really
And
lovely.
and then
Yeah.
the other thing that I do, and I know that I've spoken about this before with you, and you've done it yourself, is the ribbons. So not that everyone will see, but I have my box of all sorts of different coloured ribbons that I take to families. And then we get the child to choose which colour they'd like of the ribbon. And then that piece of ribbon then will be taken back to the funeral home to be tied around the hand of the deceased. And then that will come out of the coffin and then tied around the handle of the coffin. And then at a part in the service, normally at the end, when it's a little more private, we'll then go and cut the ribbon normally with the person. And then that piece of ribbon then goes home, knowing that
Mm,
whoever's passed has got one end and the child has the other. And that we can revert again to maybe parents that have lost a child or
mm,
an adult that's lost an adult. It doesn't really matter.
mm.
It depends on the sentiment and what fits really.
Yeah, I love that gesture. And I've done something similar. The hospice near me knits lots of twinned hearts, they're called. So there'll
Yes,
be
yes.
a biggish heart. They
Hmm.
must have volunteers who do it, and then there's a smaller one. And
Hmm.
I've bought quite a few of those, and I suggest that one heart goes in the coffin with the
Yes,
person, and the other heart is given to the grandchild, grandchildren, or
yes.
whoever would want to have it.
I've also seen that done with the hearts, like you're saying, where there is actually a piece of wall between the two,
Mm,
and we have the one in the coffin and the one outside, and we do a
mm.
similar thing with the ribbon, but with the
With the
heart.
heart, yeah. And these symbolic things, they matter, don't they? I
I
saw
think
with
they
the
do because
flowers.
suddenly that heart
Yeah.
or that piece of ribbon or that whatever becomes one of the most precious things that you've got.
Mm, yeah. And a memory of almost the last gift to each other.
It is really, and and I say the same that I had a funeral a few weeks ago where the granddaughter always bought Granny a packet of wine gums
Mm,
because that was what she did. They went to see Granny every Friday, and on a Friday she'd take her a packet of wine gums. So I suggested, well, let's go and buy her a packet again.
mm,
Let's go and buy her one. So that became a thing then for the parents to do with the little one.
mm.
They went to the shops, they bought the wine gums, and on the day of the funeral, little Lottie, which was her name, went and put on top of Grandma's coffin a packet of wine gums. And bless her heart, when she put it on, she said, "There you are, Granny, there are your wine gums."
Oh, that's
You
really
know,
gorgeous.
and that was the only involvement. But how powerful and how wonderful that that little one knew that she could go and buy Granny another packet of wine gums.
Yeah.
Now, some people might think, oh gosh, really? Well, yeah, but put yourself in that position
Mm.
and think, yes, actually, how wonderful. That
Yeah,
child has been involved. And actually, that child has been up, that child has touched the coffin, that child has been near the coffin. So suddenly, are we helping them with that fear of a coffin?
exactly. And there was one time I did a funeral, and often I'll name check people if their family want me to say, and
Mm.
her wonderful grandchildren. I'll list them, and I know it sounds like a list, but to be heard and have your name read out. Some
Okay.
families like it. Some families say, "Oh no, there's too many." Just say her many grandchildren,
Yes.
which is fine.
Yes.
Either is
Yeah.
fine. Listeners, you can choose either. But on this particular occasion, I'd said to this family, who were very um serious about everything up until this point, that
Yes.
they obviously, that's how they were managing it, and they were having very serious conversations with me. And I said, I understand they had quite a few grandchildren. This was a gentleman, and she said, oh my gosh, yeah, and great grandchildren. She said there must be 25 of them all in total now. So I said, don't name them all, I said, are they coming? And she said, well, quite a few of them are coming. And I said, okay, so anything they could do is a collection of young people, including the little ones. And she's like, oh, I don't know about that. And then she said, mind you, they're going to miss his biscuits. He had Grandad's biscuit tin, and it was like an old-fashioned kind of like, looked like a ration tin. Someone had bought him it. It's a bit of a joke, I think, like something out of Dad's Army. And he always used to, the minute any of them came in, even if they were 32, he'd go, would you like a biscuit? And then get a biscuit out of Grandad's biscuit tin. So I said, well, where is it? And they were like, I said, I think it should make an appearance at the funeral. And we'll get to that part. And then I'll go, you know, would you all like to have one of Grandad's biscuits while we're chatting about him? And that's exactly what we did. Yeah.
I think
you
it's
could
brilliant.
see them
It's about
embracing.
it's embracing it. And I think I'm very much a firm believer, Tina, that we don't all fit a certain mold in life. Why do we need to fit it in death? Why do we need to fit it to our funeral? Because it's just the done thing. Well, life's not like that. You know, we're all different. So let the funeral be different. Embrace
it's the only thing that we have in common is that we're all different.
It is. It is. So gone are the days of following a set script, following a set service, whether it be a religious service, a non-religious service. We're all different. We're all different, and one size doesn't fit all.
No. And
you know?
Si and I, in our many episodes, are always saying the same thing. There's so much choice. There's hardly anything that you can't do. Just talk to your funeral director, talk to your celebrant or your minister. You know, you'll be surprised how much is possible. So there are many
Sorry,
things.
carry on, Tina.
No, I was only going to say there are many things that you can do.
Yeah, I think also what's nice now is that with our crematoriums, for example, and also when we're doing services at different venues, is that we have the option now also to play recordings. You know, so if a child wants to record their words, we can listen to that recording. If the child was having piano lessons and Granny was paying for those piano lessons, we can listen to little Harriet play, you know, chopsticks or whatever, because it matters.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes listening to a little one reading or a younger person playing an instrument or anything, it says so more than a page of words could say.
Yeah.
And it actually makes it more about that person, the person that's passed, than words ever could. Because no one's ever going to attend a service where somebody's played this or somebody's read that, or the grandson was a carpenter, so he's made a lovely frame to put a picture in, or it's just these lovely moments that make it so unique.
Yeah. And nowadays, you do see more things like coffins that have been coloured in.
Yes.
You see,
or written on in a service. You know, people write on them in a service. Out come the Sharpie pens. Off we go.
Yeah.
Plug for Sharpie there, but there are other ones
but they are
available.
good pens. Well, the pens exist, but we like those.
Yes.
And talking about flowers, you know, when you were saying about pressing a flower, you know, at a service the other day, we had to leave enough time because everyone wanted to go as they were leaving and pick a flower out of this spray of flowers, because the spray of flowers, most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them were from this person's garden.
Yeah, and it's lovely.
Yeah.
You know, it just makes it unique and special. And those there who don't maybe understand it or can't quite get their head around it, well, that's fine. They've obviously got their way of dealing with what they deal with. But we also have to have an open mind to those who maybe have different ways and just embracing it.
Yeah. And I was thinking a lot about us recording this episode, and things were popping into my mind that I've not really thought about before. Things like height. Yes. So if you have the service in a formal place like a church or a crematorium, the catafalque, the place where the coffin is placed, is usually quite high. For an average sized adult, the coffin would be at your waist height. Yes. And so for a child, actually, it's going to look like it's right up there for a little child.
Yes.
And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, actually, maybe there's a place for taking steps to somewhere where they can get to eye level. I was thinking about that.
And the same as if they're being shoulder beard in. If they're being
Yeah,
carried in,
yeah.
that's a height to see Granny come past at. You know, and I think, I mean, I'm always not about me, but about a family. But if families want suggestions, I will always suggest that maybe they follow a coffin,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're standing there constantly looking over your left or your right shoulder, waiting for the coffin to appear at head height, and it goes past you. Whereas if we follow it in, it's far more of it just seems to fit right, rather than just all there waiting for this. And as a little one, as you say, it's even higher.
Yeah. And seating, I mean, in a lot of places, we can't do much with the seating. It's in what they call theatre style.
Yes.
So, you know, right and left with an aisle, and the action is at the end, so to speak.
Yes.
But in places where you can move chairs around, you know, you could consider doing things differently. You could do things in a circle,
absolutely. If it's small numbers and trestles in the middle. Absolutely.
And there's often a lectern or a place people stand to talk. That's often where a microphone is, but in many places now there's a microphone more in the centre, so you could not have to stand behind that if you're not very tall, if you're little.
I think also, Tina, one thing as we do as adults, and when we're not necessarily as good at it as we should be, but I think certainly with children, is the aftercare. As much as it's about the participation in a funeral, it's very much about the aftercare, to check in with the children. Are we talking to the schools? Are we talking to their places of education? Are we talking about grief, understanding their emotions, how they're feeling? And obviously out there are things like the Child Bereavement UK, the charity online, Winston's Wish. Oh, down here next to we have balloons. We have Peach Dragons that sort of work with children who are bereaved by suicide, and the specialist ones out there. And I think as a parent, we don't necessarily understand it, let alone how do we then, and it goes back to that, well, maybe if we don't get the children involved, then we haven't got to deal with, you know, there's maybe that mentality. And I think that aftercare is really quite important.
Yeah. And I'm going to put all of the things you've mentioned in the show notes for people to link directly to them. And there's also a lot of books. So, you know, if you want to try and explain when someone dies in a family, often that's when a child will ask for an explanation. And therefore, there's a couple, I think, that you and I would recommend. Yes. What do you think would be good, Charles?
One that I've used before is by Leslie Delp, which is Logan's First Funeral. That talks very much about breaking the news to the child, what the funeral's about, even to the fact of what is the funeral director, what does embalmed mean, viewing. And you might find that some parts aren't necessarily suitable depending on the age of the child. And there's it gives a glossary in the back which talks about what does casket mean, cemetery, cremate.
That's good.
Dead, embalmed. And I think another thing with children is that, and this is where it's quite good to maybe go to sites like Winston's Wish, for example, and the Child Bereavement UK, is that they talk very much about the right words to use. Because sometimes we might say things that we think we're actually doing right to protect them, but actually we're making it worse. Oh, Granny's just gone to sleep.
Yeah.
Well, the child will fear going to sleep because Granny did and she hasn't come back.
Yeah.
She's gone away. Yeah. She's gone away. Well, what happens when Dad goes away to work? Is he coming back because Granny didn't, or Grandad didn't, or Auntie Joan didn't, and I think it's just getting those words right.
No, such good points, aren't they? I mean, I have come across a very young child who, when it got to Christmas, she was frightened of the fairies because she thought they were like the angels who had taken Grandad.
Yeah.
So yeah, language is really important.
Yeah, and I think if we're saying all on Uncle John's on a cloud, looking down on you, well, maybe that's a little bit more sensitive, because that's fine, because in a way maybe he is, because we don't know, and that could be a spirit rather than I know you get deeper and deeper, but I think it's just making people aware, be cautious about what we're saying.
Yeah, another good book I'd recommend is Someone I Love Has Died. There's a kind of grief activities book. I'll put that link in as well, by somebody called Catherine Stevenson and Jenny
Yeah,
Stevenson.
okay. I
So
mean, there's lots like The Invisible String, Badger's
yeah,
Parting Gift.
Invisible String's lovely.
When something terrible happens, you know, there's that. There's No Matter What, Waiting for Wolf by Sandra Dikeman. I mean, there's lots that talk about it in a different way, I suppose.
Yeah,
and of course, when we're talking about children at funeral Tinas, we're not just talking about 6, 7 year olds. You know, we're also talking 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 8. You know, I lost my grandparents when I was 20, my first. So, but I'd worked in the funeral industry anyway. So, and I'd lost a very good school friend when I was 9, and so, you know, I'd had an introduction to it anyway. But still, at 20, it was my first family loss.
It can often be for some families, can't it? The first time a young person will experience a loss. So certainly my daughter lost both her grandparents in quick succession, and that was her first experience, apart from her hamster, of loss. Yeah. So what about your own book then? Talk us through it, Charles. What inspired you to write it?
Well, I looked after a family, and I needed to write something for the service. They'd lost their dad. They'd lost Daddy, and very tragically, he'd gone off on a normal day and sadly never came home following a tragic accident. And a story that sometimes I use in funerals is the water bugs and dragonflies. Which talks about which is Doris Stickley, I think that's by, which explains death to young children. But that didn't quite fit for this family. So I wrote a story about bees and called it Be Happy, which talks very much about a cycle of life, whether that be through humans or animals or nature. And this was based on nature and talks very much about 2 bees heading off over a meadow, and they discover a plant, a flower, sunflower that's dying, and they think they can bring it back to life. You know, they think, well, let's give it some honey and it will come back to life, but sadly not. And then the queen bee, then Queen Betty, she then explains how and why. And it's a story aimed at the younger generation, but the feedback I've had has been phenomenal.
Oh, amazing.
Far more than, you know, I published it because someone at the service asked me where I'd got it from, and they wanted a copy of it. And I said, oh, no, I wrote that. And they were like, oh, you should publish that. And, you know, I thought, no, park it, as you do. And then, yes, I eventually, 12 months in the making, with illustrators, managed to publish the book.
Brilliant.
And I've had some lovely emails off schools from a teacher who said that they've used it in the school and it's made such a difference to a young child that's lost someone recently, who wasn't wanting to come into school but now comes into school and looks forward to reading the book. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know.
Yeah. It's so important, isn't it? And we have to talk to children in an accessible way.
Yeah, I think so. And if that book has made a difference just to that one child, then fantastic.
Yeah. Job well done. Job well done.
I'm happy.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this in a few other episodes recently, with Emma Gray, who was a widow at a young age, and how she does things with her children on an annual basis to remember their dad. And I would just encourage all our listeners to think, obviously, of the funeral, as Charles and I have said, but also of the grief and the understanding of that, and beyond that immediate time. You know, how's that going to be as time goes on?
Yes, and as you say, it's the anniversaries, it's the birthdays, the Mother's Day, the Father's Day, Christmas, Easter, because Dad might have been the one that hid the eggs around the garden. And it's finding that new norm, but also embracing it and not thinking that we have to just forget it.
Yeah.
and acknowledge it. And at Christmas, you know, I talk to families sometimes who've lost near Christmas, or actually in that year, go and buy a special bauble that year. So that bauble comes to be dad's, mum's, whoever's. So every year we put it on the tree. We know.
Yeah.
We know. We're not forgetting them.
No, you know, we're all kept alive by the way that we appear in people's living lives that they're living, you know, aren't we? This has been a really great conversation, Charles. Is there anything you want to add before I ask you my final question?
I don't think so. No, it's been lovely to chat with you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to just come and talk with just my feelings and my thoughts on, you know, younger people, children at funerals. And I think it's it's been great. So thank you.
That's all right. And of course, I always ask all of my guests what they would do or want for their own funeral. Have you given this any thought, Charles?
What would I want? Wow, goodness gracious me. It's quite difficult being in the industry, isn't it? Because you know lots of people and you don't want to offend anybody.
You don't have to name who's going to do anything, but just like, what would you like to happen?
I think I would like it. Part of me is quite traditional, I think. But then part of me is a little bit off the wall. So I think very much it's about everyone being together. I'd want a celebration and not a, you know, not downbeat, not morbid. And of course there's going to be sadness. Well, I hope. But I think it's very much about music and stories and remembering, really. That's the big thing, really. And music for me is it's big music. Music's very powerful for me. So I'd want something that's quite uplifting and you know, makes people think, maybe.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much, Charles. It's been an absolute pleasure having you
Tina.
on Good Goodbyes. You've been listening to Tina and Charles. See you next time.
You've been listening to Good Goodbyes, the Funeral Facts podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment and share. Drop any questions on our social media, on Instagram, or in the text option in the show notes.
Si and I are qualified professionals, but we always advise our clients to seek any additional support from medical practitioners if they need to. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. Stay well and be kind to one another.